RIP updates are forwarded out all RIP-enabled interfaces every 30 seconds by default. However, RIP updates really only need to be sent out to interfaces that are connected to RIP-enabled routers. In this particular topology, the RIP updates really need to go out the serial 00 interface to the north and ultimately to the east router. Sending out those updates out interfaces such as FA00 can adversely impact the network in three different ways. One, wasted bandwidth. Bandwidth would be used by the network updates or the routing updates that could be used to transport critical network traffic. It can waste your resources because all devices on that local area network must process any traffic that is received and therefore is taking up resources and process time that is unnecessary. And finally, security risks. You don't want to send updates out interfaces that are not necessary, that aren't needed, because those devices down there are going to learn about the networks, the routes to destination networks, and that can pose a security risk. You can use the following command. I'm going to demonstrate that to stop the RIP updates from going out the fast Ethernet 00 interface. I'm going to show you how to do that on the west router. I'm going to go ahead and config from the terminal. I do this within the routing protocol itself, so I log into router RIP with the command router RIP. I then issue the passive interface command. The interface that I want to make passive is that fast Ethernet 00, so I go ahead and type fast Ethernet 0/0, hit enter, and that's all it takes to make the fast Ethernet 00 passive, meaning that the RIP updates are not going to be forwarded out that interface now. I can do a Control-Z. I can do a show run just to verify that that passive interface command is included in the command lineup for our RIP configuration. The other thing that's very useful to do in RIP is to set up a default route to be forwarded so that all the routers in the topology know where the internet is, where the ISP is, and how to get their traffic to be forwarded to the correct destination. In our particular topology, if the north host or the east host would like to communicate or to reach a device that's out in the internet, they have to reach the ISP. And there's no way that they could have all of the routes in the world included in their routing table. So we do need to have a static default route on all of our routers. If I look at the north router and I do a show IP route, you can see that the gateway of last resort is not set on this router, which means that I can only get to the networks that are displayed in the routing table. And if I want to reach some place on the internet far away, I cannot get there. Additionally, if I look at the east router and I do a show IP route, the gateway of last resort is not set on this router as well. Now I could go ahead and configure a quad 0 route as demonstrated on both the north and the east router, but there's an easier way to do this. And that is I can go into the west router and I can tell it to go ahead and include the default route, that quad 0 route, in the updates that it sends to both the north and the east router. So let me demonstrate how to do that. I config from the terminal, as always. I go into router RIP. Command is very straightforward. It's just default information, originate, default route, static quad 0 route will now be forwarded with all the other routing information every 30 seconds out to the other RIP routers. I do a Control-Z. I do a show run. And you can see that that default information originate command is included in the router RIP lineup. I want to now go back and show you on the north and the east routers that that information has been learned. You can see show IP route in the new routing table that the gateway of last resort from the north is now to the 192.168.2.1 interface. That's the serial 00 interface on the west router to the rest of the world, the quad 0 route, which points out to the ISP. Additionally, on the east router, If I do a show IP route, the gateway of last resort is also now there, showing that if I go to the 192.168.4.1, which is the directly connected interface to the north router, I will reach the rest of the world or the quad zero route and get out to the ISP.